Awesome. So I think something we hear quite commonly is people worrying about needing medical exam when applying. Can you take us through what the application process is really like?
Yeah, no, great question. So for the vast majority of customers, typically speaking, all that it's going to be is a over-the-phone application, and they're going to ask you a number of different questions around your medical history, right? So whether you've had diabetes, cancer, mental health, heart issues, it could be some examples, but it's going to ask you about your medical history right the way from since you're from birth. So really important as part of your application process for life insurance, you have a duty of reasonable care when you go ahead and answer these questions. So really important that we're complying with that legislation and those requirements, which will be explained to you at the time you took out a policy. But you really want to just be open and upfront, because if they've got a problem with insuring you, you'd rather find out now at application time than at claim time. So really important. And what you'll often find is, so there's a medical section. The next one is around your occupation. So they'll want to find out a bit more about your occupation, what you're doing. Are you onshore, offshore, if you're in the mining industry? What are those duties, hours? If you've got a bit of a unique role. So that's really important to also be mindful. There might be some questions around that. And then the other one is around your residency status. So the number of people moving to Australia each year are really important that we understand if your visa is eligible for a policy or not. Here again, different insurers have got different views on these, so really important to look around if you are struggling in your application process. But for the vast majority of the temporary visas, the ones that are 2 years plus or have pathways to, you're going to be not a problem. However, here again, worthwhile investigating different insurers. And then the next question is, do we have to do a blood test every time, or what's going to happen after we've gone ahead and answered those questions, right? So typically speaking, you're only going to need if you're going for really high sums insured. So if you're younger than 45, typically speaking, you can get up to $2 million worth of cover without any default mandatory blood. So typically speaking, there's not many people that are taking out that level of cover, going, for the most part. But here again, that is where some of the mandatory requirements come in. But what we find for the most part is that after they've completed the application, if they do need to clarify something with your doctor, what they're going to do is the insurer is going to go ahead and write to your doctor at their cost and say, okay, could you please tell me a bit more about, this client's XYZ condition, right? They're then going to come back to the insurer and explain that a bit further, and then often the insurer will make a decision. There might also be a questionnaire. They may also need a repeat blood test. So let's say, for example, you are a diabetic and you haven't done a recent HbA1c. The insurer may say, look, we'd like a more recent copy of that. Would you be okay doing with HbA1c, also at their cost again? So for the vast majority of them, you're not going to need to go and see your doctor. It'll be kind of handled in the background if there are any requirements. But if there are any tests requested, typically speaking, they're all paid for by the insurer, and they'll often use a mobile nurse to really help make it as convenient as possible.